All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to a very special episode of DM Radio. I'm on the road today in Wimberley, Texas, my adopted hometown, quite frankly. Brought the wife and kid down here, and we have a very special show for you today with Ken Graziano, one of our favorite folks in the data industry, and Jordan Morrow from AgileOne. And guess what? We're all speakers at the Data Universe Conference that's coming up in April, April 10th and 11th, New York City, at the new Javits Center. Pretty excited about that. I'm going to do a talk on the death of journalism. That'll be interesting. I'm going to say how AI and systems of record will fuse to shard out all sorts of interesting news bits. And that will be a big part of news is dynamically generated information, pulling from source systems, from trusted systems, personalized for you. Because what do you want? You want personalized information. You want information that's relevant to your business. And traditional media models simply will not provide that. So things are changing rapidly. And Jordan, I see you already nodding your head. Let me go ahead and bring you in to kind of comment on this. I mean, we're talking about the data of universe, understanding it, but everything is changing. Jordan, what's your take on what's happening?
Oh, I'm personally a big fan, but there's when GPT launched. Now we always have to understand AI has been around for decades, but it hasn't been as consumable as it became in November of 22, right? And now it's going to permeate everything, right? There's a great book out there by Mustafa Suleiman called The Coming Wave, and it's very interesting. I don't know how many people picked up. He's the founder of DeepMind, which I believe it was Google who bought them. Well, he's going to Microsoft, right? So that big I actually like the empire they're building because Mustafa is a great voice of reason around where AI is and the worry. But you're exactly right. Everything is shifting, right? A big example of this would be Tyler Perry, the actor producer who's done so much, was investing a lot in the Atlanta area, I believe it was, on a studio, and he's halted it because of what Sora could be doing. And I don't know if he's permanently halted it, but temporarily, I think at minimum. And you look at all these things, to your point, journalism and all these things. I look forward to your talk, Eric, because I'm super interested to see what you say on it. I'm an author, right? And the fact that you can self-publish and write a book in a day or two is so interesting now. And so I drastic changes are here. They're going to continue to come. This wave isn't going to slow down. And for me, part of it is how do we empower everybody to be a part of it versus being superseded by it? And that's a
Mm.
big deal to me.
Yeah, we have to ride this wave. And the show today, we're going to talk about data literacy and what that means and how you can get it. And I think the key here is, it's not just data literacy because words can be data, of course. So you talk about media, articles, content like videos, of course, with Sora and what it can do, which is absolutely stunning. It's just amazing.
Yep.
I think there's several other shoes that have to drop here over the next coming months and years, quite frankly, on the cost structures. A whole bunch of money has been thrown into these engines to get them up and running. What does it take to keep them running? How are we going to be paying for that kind of thing? I think those are all questions that remain to be answered. But you raise a really good point. And when you talk about data literacy, it's still very important to understand the tenets of data as we enter this AI world, because all AI is doing is taking data, using it to train things, models, and then spitting out data in different formats. But to understand that process of how we get there and what we do with it, that's really important, right, Jordan?
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. It's we're watching the AI will modify and improve the technical skills, right? Where we're not going to have to be as technical anymore. But what matters a lot to me is as I've started to talk about it more and more, I've been talking about data literacy for years, but bringing the term AI literacy in there because you're exactly right. It's understanding. I don't need you to write a vector model and large language model. I don't need you to do all that. But do you know how to prompt it well? Do you know how to ask good questions of it? And then maybe more importantly, do you know how to evaluate the responses well and then execute decisions off of what the AI gives you? And that, to me, is to your point. I like how you said it. We have to teach people how to ride the wave. How do you ride this wave forward and become a part of it versus having that wave go over you? And data, AI literacy, understanding how these things work, and maybe more importantly, how you can apply them in your life. I just before this call was using generative AI, right? I love these things, but I think but this is my world. I live and breathe and love data and AI. Whereas a lot of people, there's fear, there's intimidation, and I think that's what data and AI literacy should help at least alleviate some is that intimidation or fear or the unknown.
And before I throw it over to Kent, I'll throw one more question at you. From a news veracity perspective, we have this very curious situation now where we're going from fake news, which we've all heard about, to generated fictional information, which is what these AI models can do. So in between that, we need our moorings, right? And we need embeddings, basically, in the AI world and large language models. Your embeddings, which are typically delivered via a RAG model, retrieval augmented generation, those are your anchors of truth. And I think we're going to see a lot of attention focused on very sophisticated RAG models and filling your vector database, which is where your embeddings go, with highly trusted, curated enterprise data. And that is how you rein this in and can ride this wild horse, right, Jordan?
Oh, absolutely. Like there's always going to be bad players, and I think we need to understand that, right? And I think that there's going to be hallucinations, which the AI is going to give us. There's going to be all this stuff, but the old premise of garbage in, garbage out matters greatly when it comes to what AI brings to us, right? And you can make the data and the AI say what you want, but when it comes to how we trust these things, I like how you said it, Eric. It is there's this middle area of embedding the right things into it, the right information, so that the AI is spitting out good information for us. And of course, again, this is where the literacy side comes in. Not everything is going to be good. If we just take it at face value, we could run into problems. Versus, okay, we've put the moorings, we've put the foundation in place. That's wonderful. The models are looking that way. Well, now on the front end, where 90 to 99% of people won't be building those moorings, but they're going to be using it, we then embed that literacy side to say, okay, take 5 minutes to just verify what it gave you. That's it. It doesn't take hours on end, but say,
Right.
does it smell right? Does it sniff right? Does this pass the test? If I
Mhm.
apply this, what's it going to look like? And I think part of that is the mindset of empowerment and teaching people that it's not a set it and forget it thing. Brent Dykes wrote about that in data storytelling or data work. And I like that term. Don't just set it and forget it, iterate on everything, iterate and improve, be adaptable. And then that helps you ride the wave a little bit better.
That's an excellent advice. And Kent, I'll bring you back in. You know what's really exciting about this, and it's just dawning on me as I talk to you gentlemen, is that what we're seeing now with these large language models, especially in the enterprise, really is a fusion of two very different, very important worlds. One is structured data, which we've had in the data warehouse and data marts and all these highly curated, highly sophisticated models for storing and persisting, usually transactional data, but also other kinds of data, with the whole world of language and words. So data in relational systems tends to be numeric and value. Of course, LLMs convert words to numeric values to be able to do their comparisons, but really the end result is words. And so this is the ultimate fusion of data and words and language. What do you think, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, over the last decade, we've seen more and more interest in getting at we'll call it the unstructured data, which is what you're talking about, right? Being able to look at things like documents and images and um, music files and anything other than the structured data, like you said in the uh, prior decades, we worked really hard at trying to have these curated, traceable, auditable repositories of data, which we typically call data warehouse. And nowadays they may call it a data lake house. Some people call them data lakes. Um, but the key there was being able to validate that data, right? If we're going to feed these things into AI, into large language models, to avoid, as Jordan said, the garbage in, garbage out, right? This is where that data literacy comes in, is being able to look at that and understand, how good is this data? Well, part of that is the metadata we have to collect around it, and that goes for the documents as well. Where did these documents come from? Um, Snowflake has recently acquired some software to analyze document data, right? And be able to extract information from these documents so that you can get at it and you can merge it with structured data in the traditional data warehouse there. But we still got to be able to educate people on how to know if this is good. Can we validate it? I remember working on a data warehouse at Hewlett Packard years ago, the enterprise data warehouse there, and we were dealing with supply chain data. And one of the things we did is, adopting an agile methodology. We had, a couple of the business owners actually working with us. And as that data came through, we tried to make it visible to them as quickly as possible so that they could validate that we were getting the right data. And they were literally going and looking at the reports we were pulling out and going back to SAP and going, hey, I don't see this data in SAP. Or the worst case scenario turned out to be there was missing data, that the extracts that the
Right.
SAP folks wrote on SAP BW were failing every night. There was a buffer limit, and we weren't actually getting all the data. And the only way we knew that was by having the business people, really the domain experts, looking at what we had and saying, wait a minute, this is incomplete. Yeah, we know we're missing stuff. And it took us a while to figure out why. So imagine now, fast forward to now, that we're loading in, say you're a law firm and you're loading in all kinds of contracts, and
Right.
you've got your transactional data about your clients and what you're doing with them and what you're charging them and what you're billing them and all that sort of stuff, and then trying to feed that into an AI that's going to help you solve these problems faster. If you're missing some of that data, somebody's got to know enough about your data ecosystem
Right.
to say, hey, wait a minute, there should be 555,000 contracts in here, and we've only got 225. Oh, yeah, something's really wrong here. We're missing, which means, what the results coming out of the LLM might look like a hallucination, but it isn't actually a hallucination. It's just wrong, right? And that's because we didn't understand what we were doing, and we didn't build in the ability to trace the data. The
Right.
whole, I see, the basic data management concepts that we've been dealing with for multiple decades now, lineage, auditability, traceability, all of that is even more important now for us to be able to validate, what's coming out the other side of an AI. Right?
Yep.
How else do we know? I mean, we may not understand the black box that is the AI or the LLM, but we've got to be able to understand what we should be able to get out of it based on what we're putting in, and what we're putting in needs to be high quality, curated. So oddly enough, a lot of people keep asking, well, is this the death of the data warehouse? It's like, I don't think so.
I don't think
The
so.
data warehouse as a centralized, massive, multi-petabyte repository, okay, maybe that is a physical thing, is not necessarily what you need, but the concepts that Bill Inman originally wrote in his Building the Data Warehouse book. Why are we doing this? What should we be, how should we be thinking about things? And again, that gets back to the data literacy is, where's that data coming from? A data swamp is the wrong thing to be
Right.
feeding into this, right?
Right.
Uncurated, little bit of hardly any metadata. And it's like, well, can't the AI figure out the relationships in the data? Yeah, I mean, it's your guess is as good as mine, literally now, right? It's like,
Wow.
I can you look at a Hadoop cluster and all those files and figure out how that data is related? Well, we give that to the data scientists, and what did they do? They spent 80% of their time going through that data, sifting through that data, trying to figure out how is this related to that. When, hey, if we had a data model, if we had built that out, we had curated it, we met with the business and understand how the business works and what the business processes are and how all this data interrelates to each other. Okay, then we can build something that, again, we might call it a data lakehouse or a data warehouse these days. And it might be distributed. It might be in a data mesh format, but that becomes the source of information that is being fed into these AIs. And I don't see how we're going to do it and trust the results
Right.
without doing all of that.
Well, I mean, you make some excellent points here, and citations. One of the things I'm going to talk about in my speech on media and the death of journalism is that there are too many anonymous sources these days. And if you have too many anonymous sources, you kind of can't get to the bottom of something. Now, I understand sometimes it's necessary to protect someone's identity, but when every story has two, three, four anonymous sources, I mean, is that really responsible journalism? I think the short answer is no. And so we're going to have to see more transparency on that. And I'll throw this one over to you, Jordan. Knowing where a model picked a piece of information is very important. And I think that I won't say it was an afterthought, but what I will say is there does seem to be some work being done on that right now. And some of these more sophisticated RAG models, a company called Kindi got bought by Click, KYNDI. They had a very nice feature where you would feed it a document, like let's say a user manual for some sophisticated electronics device, and then it would automatically give you frequently asked questions and the answers, and you would curate those. And then if the source document changes, it automatically updates and re-curates, if you will. But then what it did that was very interesting is when you asked it a question, it'll give you the answer and it gives you a drop down. You can click on it, it shows you where it got that information from the source. So it says we got the first sentence from page 1, paragraph 2, the second sentence from page 10, paragraph 9. So you as the user can go vet this information, and that's the key to success, right, Jordan?
Well, I mean, isn't it so funny? I mean, Kent, you said it so well. Eric, you're saying it well. We're going back to fundamental principles of how
Right.
data analytics and AI should work. And I think AI gratefully is forcing our hand here because, I mean, if you look at the data space, it's always been caught up in hype. It's always been caught up in all these things, except this is the one time maybe the hype is going to be lived up to, and we have to ride the wave well. And it's so interesting to me that we're talking about data governance, data management, we're talking about AI governance, we're talking about the lineage of the data. Shouldn't these things be what we've been talking about forever? And I hate, it's frustrating, right? I travel the world speaking at times, and it's like we've got to quit being so focused on the tools and the hype and be focused on principles that lead to business outcomes. Can't you mention that in there? Is my fourth book that I'm writing is about data professionals succeeding in business, right? It's because we have to, and that's what I'm speaking about at Data Universe, is we have got to start now focusing ourselves again that data and AI are here as supportive tools to drive the business. And
Yeah,
if
that's a
you're AI,
great
oh, go ahead,
point.
Eric.
Hold
Yeah.
that thought. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, a fantastic show with Jordan Morrow of AgileOne and our good friend Ken Graziano, longtime data warrior and expert, now an independent analyst. He's like Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he's still around, right? He left, but he's still here. But he's more powerful now because he's on the outside, and he looks like he's from ZZ Top. So it's a good combination. But Jordan, I'll throw it over to you. You were just talking about your speech. So tell us, what are you going to talk about at Data Universe, April 10th and 11th in New York City?
Yeah, so for me, it's about, it's about how do data professionals, AI professionals, how can you succeed in the business world? And I think we've forgotten so often on data and AI are just supportive tools for the business. That's what they should be. They're not buy a tool and everything's going to succeed. You're not going to buy AI, Kent, as you were describing around this idea that you could just buy AI and it'll clean all your data. Well, wouldn't that be awesome? That's not how this works. And so I think one of the cool things happening, at least I hope happening, is we're not just buying tools if we're doing it right. We're centering things. We're doing it, we're getting our governance, our management, and our things in place so that lineage can be traced, so that things can be traced. And so when I'm speaking at Data Universe, I'm hopeful that I want these data professionals to walk away thinking, if our BI isn't even working well, why are we even thinking about AI? And if we do not know how to tie all the data work that we are doing back to a business outcome, right? Think about that. A business has set goals. It could be a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, all of this. How many data professionals today could say, this is exactly how my work is supporting those 3 to 5-year plans? And if we can't say that, take a step back, evaluate your work, and figure out how you can. Because
Right.
that's where this hits the road, right? We see far too often that 10 years for CDOs and things like this are far too short. And it's not necessarily because they're not technically talented, but what about their business acumen and being able to tie everything that they do and prove out value? And that
Hmm.
value is kind of an obscure word in data, right? Because sometimes it can be hard to prove it out. But what I really want to help data professionals understand is here are some steps, and here are things you can do to practically look at the work that you're doing and then apply it out to the business. And if you
Hmm.
don't know, like one thing for me is if you don't know how someone is using the report or the work you're building, stop sending it and see if they get mad at you.
And
If
that's
they
right.
don't get mad at you, if they don't get mad, stop doing the work.
Right.
Figure out network. And here we might make some of these data professionals uncomfortable if they're more introverted or this and that, but go network with people. Sit down with the marketing
Yeah.
team, figure out what in the world they're
Right.
trying to do, and then apply your knowledge of data and AI to say, I think we can help here. This is what we could be doing. That to me matters so much, especially in riding this wave.
That's very interesting. It's such a good point. First of all, it's one of my favorite tactics. I had someone tell me that tactic like 15 years ago in the second year of DM radio, and I was like, that's clever. Pull the plug and see who complains. Apparently, Elon Musk even did that right after he bought Twitter. He would go around and just unplug racks of servers and just see what
See what
happened.
happened.
I mean, that's pretty funny. That's pretty bold, but it's a good move. But Jordan, I really like this point that you just made, and I think what we're going to see here is that organizational hierarchies are going to be disrupted. And that's a good thing because now they still do tend to be silos of people, right? You have silos of data, you have silos of functionality, you have silos of people. Like the marketing department talks to each other. They don't want to talk to sales. The sales guys are annoying. The salespeople talk to each other. They don't want to talk to marketing. They're not doing a good enough job. That kind of thing, that has to stop. And I think that AI aficionados, if you will, in the organization should move around and should do exactly what you mentioned, which is go talk to marketing for a while, go talk to sales for a while. You're going to find out where the connections occur, where you have to thread something from one place to another. And AI can be very powerful for that kind of thing, right, Jordan?
Absolutely. Like one of the things that we need to get data and AI professionals more comfortable with is leadership skills, soft skills, communication skills. Be the bridge between these areas because the reality is if marketing is frustrated with sales and sales is frustrated with marketing, but you have data and AI that you could say, look, it's neither of you. Here's the gap. And then you
Hmm.
can bridge the gaps. You can be the leaders of the business, right? It's almost as if data and AI should be the right hand people for leaders in an organization if it's done right. And so that's why, to your point, utilize the tools and technology. These things are there to augment you as a human, not supersede you as a human. And so, how can you utilize those to bridge gaps, to find answers, to illuminate, not just pure reporting, right, which is descriptive analytics, but allow these things to do predictive, prescriptive, and diagnostic analytics for you so that the tedious and the mundane and the uncertainty can become more certain. I think there's so much power in these things, but I think we
Right.
get so caught up in tools. Well, if you don't have the skills to do it, which is this data and AI literacy, then I don't care what the tools do. The organization doesn't care.
That's right. Well, and the AI in many ways has kind of disintermediated the whole tool stack, it seems to me, because, and Kent, I'll throw this one up to you. If you think about business intelligence and all the tools that we came up with for pulling the data in, analyzing the data, MOLAP, ROLAP, all these types of technologies, these two different types of approaches, they're all designed to ideally facilitate an analysis of the data that would lead to some decision being made. But they all do things in slightly different ways. And if you look at what AI can do, especially these large language models with their pattern recognition capabilities, there's a lot of overlap in what they can do and what the traditional tech stack can do. And the bottom line is that right now, at least, LLMs are pretty inexpensive for the user to put into play. And I think what we're really going to see is these LLMs and AI take on a new role in the workflow. You'll use them in specific parts of a workflow for stochastic purposes, mostly for exploring and understanding. Take a big chunk of data, throw it at this LM, say, what is this? And just see what it comes back. So it's in the discovery side, which is so important. And then you do have to check it. Obviously, we've been talking about that fact check things, make sure, does it pass the smell test? But I really do see AI as very disruptive for traditional business intelligence. But what do you think, Kent?
Yeah, I think it's the evolution of business intelligence, right? To
Mm.
be able to ask a question and have the AI actually come up with that answer for you without you having to know Tableau or Power BI or one of those to go out and have a pre-built catalog that has all this stuff in it so that, any business analyst can kind of put together what they're looking for, that they can ask the question and the AI comes up with the basic answer. And like you said, discovery. One of the things that I learned in trying to do agile data warehousing was the sooner I could visualize the data for the users, the sooner I found out I was wrong and that we were missing data, or that they really weren't clear on what problem they were trying to solve. Because once they saw the data, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's not what I was really looking for." So if they can ask a question via an LLM and say, again, show me, um, tell me about sales in the Western region for the last 3 quarters. Notice any odd trends, any outliers, and it comes back and shows you. And then the next step of that, as you explore the data and go, this would be very helpful for our CFO to see. Build me a bar chart with year over year comparisons for all the sales by region across the globe, and the AI builds that dashboard for you. You don't
Right.
have to you don't have to call IT and say, we got to spin up a new project to go build this. But you, as a business person, can say, this is what I need. I need to see this data, this data, this data, this data, build it for me. And whatever, of course, that assumes then somewhere in the background, somebody has made a tool or several tools available that are connected to the LLM, that it knows how to go out and then build these things. So again, we're back to that, the basic principles of data management and the tool stack. And so as an end user, the tool stack doesn't make any difference to me.
Right.
But
That's right.
my tool is now this AI interface. That's my business intelligence tool now, and I will define what I want as output and how I want it to look. If I want bar charts or pie charts, or I just want it in an Excel spreadsheet, and say put it in an Excel spreadsheet for me, and boom, and now we're talking about really democratizing the data and a new level of self-service BI, right? One of the
Yeah.
things that we've been,
That's
trying
right.
to achieve for the last 20 years. But again, it all is still dependent on what's been done in the background, what's been curated, and whether it's a data mesh or it's you're using some virtualization software like Zataris or Denodo or something like that. That all still has to be there. That fundamental platform has to be there, for it to find that data. And again, not be looking at a data swamp and just, well, I can't really tell, right? You don't know if the answer is right because it's not been curated well enough as
Right.
the source. Um, One of the things that Jordan, what you started talking about, made me think of, we were talking about data literacy and how important it is, people understand the data ecosystem. On the IT side, I think we're talking about is business literacy, right? That's the gap now that we have, and we've had that for decades. We've always talked about having IT have a seat at the table. Well, it doesn't do any good to have a seat at the table if you don't know how to talk to these people,
Right.
right? Right? If you can't
The quote.
communicate in something other than bits and bytes, then they're not going to listen to you. You have to be able to ask questions using their terminology. You've got to understand that aspect of the business. So I like this idea of, having these people basically embedded with different domains. And I kind of think that the data mesh theories around having domain teams that are really cross-functional teams. You've got the domain experts, which are the business people who understand that part of the business and therefore, understand the data, working hand in hand with some technical people to help
Hmm.
build out these data products. And I
Hmm.
think we're talking about the same thing. Somewhere you've got to get that cross pollination between the understanding of the data, what's available with the data, what kinds of things can we do with the data, and on the business side, understanding, what problems are we trying to solve? What business
Hmm.
problem are we trying to solve? Like you said, yeah, if there's reports that nobody's using, yeah, turn them off because they're not solving a problem for anybody. I
That's
actually
right.
did do that on one of my gigs years ago. We had way too many reports, and I said, hey, why don't we just turn some of these things off and see if anybody screams?
Yeah.
And in most cases, nobody did,
That's
because we
right.
could look at the metrics and say, how often were these reports being used? Okay, here's a report hasn't been used for a year. Okay, well, maybe it's something that just gets run annually,
Right.
or maybe it's of no value anymore. And we need to start tracking down people. And it's like, or we could just shut it off. But the risk there was, if it hadn't been used in a year, that 2 weeks later might be the time that it needs to be used, and then you'll find out. That's kind of a hardcore way to go about it. Hopefully today we'll get more metrics and know what are people using, and if we're
Right.
empowering people with these LLMs and AIs, hopefully that's one of the metrics that's being tracked, is what kind of questions are being asked of the
Right.
data, right? And
Right.
who is asking, and what are their roles?
Right. No, so you bring up a really, really good point here. We got about 2.5 minutes left in this segment, but Jordan, I'm going to throw it over to you quickly. I'll tell you what really excites me and kind of freaks me out about what we're talking about here. When you think about the reporting, the publishing system, that's a push system, right? I mean, you pull reports, but the reporting group is pushing this out all the time. That's traditional media pushing out information. Then the internet came along and you pulled information. So like, no, I want to find this, I want to find that. I think that these LLMs are going to basically invert these de facto data flow of information in organizations. You're going to get some push, but really the push is going to be into the vector database, and then most of it's going to be pull, which means most of this sort of rote report delivery stuff is out the window. What do you think, Jordan?
I think it needs to become dynamic, right? It needs to, because that is such an iterative way of looking at things, right? And the more that we increase business data literacy and the whole world of this, I think you could get a push pull with all the AI that gives you more effective outcomes to drive a business forward. And this
Mhm.
is why I think one of the key skills that we create or need to create within this AI world in data and AI literacy is our creativity, right? It's so simple to just ask a question, take the result, and go. All that is basically you've taken this status quo and made it this status quo. Where I want to see it go is, let's test this AI. Let's ask it these weird things. Let's see what it does for me from a data perspective, and allow your human creativity to just flourish within this. And I call the best data literacy detectives out there children. They're out there figuring things out, asking questions all the time. You know what adults don't do? Ask questions all the time. It's time to start asking lots and lots of questions. Let the AI learn, let yourself learn, and then deliver better outcomes from it.
Man, that's fantastic. That's a great, great comment you just made. I think that's exactly correct. And, I'm reminded of Matt McClarty from Boomy. He had a great line on a show, or I guess it was late last year. He said the key for success with all this machine learning stuff is learning, meaning us learning, human beings. We have to learn how these things work, what the contours are, what they do in certain situations, how to identify the hallucinations. All that is good stuff, folks. Don't touch it. That. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio talking to Jordan Morrow of AgileOne and Kent Graziano, both speakers at the Data Universe Conference coming up April 10th and 11th in New York City. And we want to talk about data literacy and business literacy. And you know what the most beautiful part about these LLMs, and Kent, I'll throw it over to you first and then Jordan, is just ask it, like, what is data literacy? What I found is that any topic that is widely published about, these models do a very good job of encapsulating and summarizing. And what's interesting is for topics, again, that have been widely published, like what is data literacy, you're going to get good results from this because there are lots of people who have written about it and they cover some of the same ground. And really what these engines do, of course, is they vectorize, so they convert words, paragraphs, text into numeric values. It's geography, right? It's a point and a vector in a certain direction. And then what it's doing is it's mapping. It takes your prompt and goes, okay, this prompt has all these words in it. Let's go and see where these words exist in other vectors and come back. And goodness gracious, it's so good. Sometimes it's off. And then you tell it, oh no, I meant this. And I love the way it apologizes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, here's your answer. It's like the other thing that people don't do very often is take criticism well. And LLMs don't care. You can criticize them all day. Oh, I'm sorry. Here, try this. Oh, I'm sorry. Try that. So, Kent, if you want to know what data literacy is in the context of your business, ask the LLM, right? It'll tell you.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's it's a certain amount. It's kind of like a heat map, right? It's going to what's the preponderance of words around this question, right? And based on what's been published, obviously, out in the internet, and it's going to find where it finds agreement. It can come back and say, well, in general, this is what people think data literacy is, right? Then your next question should be, well, how do I achieve data literacy in our organization, right? And I know there's lots of techniques and people talk about this all the time. I mean, it requires training, requires education and learning, as you just said, right? People have to learn. I remember very early on back in, it was like the late 90s, working at a big telco where we had basically, built a BI system, but we needed to empower teams all over the country. And, there weren't IT people that were going to go do this. So we did train the trainer. And we brought in what we called them back then was super users. And we showed them how to use, at the time, the reporting tool we were using, I think it was Oracle Discoverer. And what we did is we had worked with them to find out, in general, what kind of questions did people want to ask, built a bunch of templates, and then taught them how to change those templates. And in the process, they got to understand, what kind of data do we have available? What kinds of questions can we ask? And if they came up with something that none of these templates really allowed them to ask, we'd build a new template. And the super users would learn how to do that. And then they would go back to their teams, and they were the embedded expert. So it was actually a business person who had been empowered with a self-service BI tool to do this. And that improved, again, the literacy within the organization. And like I said, this was in the late 90s we were doing this sort of thing. And that's what we need to do even more. We've got to, we've got new kinds of tools, we've got new, the modern data stack, we've got the cloud, and we have all of these things, but the job is still the same, is
Mm-hmm.
educating them on what's available. And the reverse, as we mentioned before, on the business literacy side, we as the technical people need to be asking them, what kind of business problems do you need to solve? What in your day-to-day job, where are you having issues? What kind of things do you need to know to do your job, and do your job not only well, but better?
Mm-hmm.
How can we help you be more efficient and more productive, and solve whatever it is, based on your role and your department and your domain knowledge, how can we help you? What kind of data would help? And if
Mm-hmm.
it is, well, I need summaries. Again, I mentioned a law firm earlier. I need summaries of, all the contracts, all the real estate contracts that we have, trying to see if there's any patterns in what we do, if there's a better way to do that, or do we have any outliers out there, something that we did with a client in the last 5 years that we basically haven't done with any other client. And then we can ask the question, well, how lucrative was that? Should we
Mm-hmm.
try to be expanding the business in that area? And that's that, again, that interface of the unstructured data with the structured data from a client perspective, to look at and say, where did we make our money? Where were our margins? Is this little outlier really something that we've missed? That's a little gold nugget out there that, we need to take a couple of our senior people and have them go out and, beat the bushes and try to find some more clients that need this particular problem solved, that we can help them with because we have the expertise.
That's a very good point. And Jordan, I'll throw a very specific use case over at you, akin to what Kent is talking about. Think about customer service, especially customer service for maybe a sophisticated professional service that you offer, that's your company. You can go through, especially if you have a good system of record that shows which customer service interaction had a positive result, which had a negative result. So you know what? You take all the positive results, you train your model on that, you embed that into your vector database, for example. And now you can train a chat bot, to mimic the behavior that led to the good results, because it's going to come up with some simple rules of, okay, well, this person always said thank you and please. This person always did this. The little things that you can now ascertain because of the AI. So you find what's working in your organization, you model that, you deploy it, right, Jordan?
Absolutely. And what I would say is, not only do you have the bot, but internal at the company, create a tool that allows these reps to say, I'm working with this customer XYZ. These are the demographics of the customer. This is how long they've been with us, all these different things. And you say, I'm working on this project for that customer. What are the key things that I need to do to give me a high likelihood of closing this deal or to do these things? So not only do you have a bot that can help on the front end to simplify the tasks that customers are reaching out to, think about the whole customer success world, right? Where historically we've been trying to do it as people and we're trying to build the relationships, which absolutely still needs to happen. But now you've built an internal tool that you can go to that interfaces with you like a human. Just type in a few things, and then you're like, ooh, I really like that. What can I do here? You type a few more things, and you type a few more things, where it is giving you the best case scenario that you then combine with your human element. Well, I know this person likes the color red, so if I bring a gift that couples with this and that, I'll make it red. And, you know, all these different things that we are now enhancing the human. And that's what I want these tools to do, is to enhance us versus just let the tool do all the work. No, let it be your partner. And I think in a customer success sort of way, you got the bot out there doing all the simple requests and all that. The bot handles it, does a great job. Now you get to dig in and do what I call, and it comes from a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. You get to do the deep work where all this tedious stuff now is being handled for you. Now you get to dig in, use your literacy skills, figure things out, and execute better decisions going forward. And by the way, then you input information and the AI learns, did that work? Did it not work? And you're just improving the models going forward.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point. And you also bring up a good point that someone else made on a show recently, one of our guests from FPT. Ken, I'll throw this over to at you. She said, look, early in the game, deploy these tools internally. Don't start externally. Don't start deploying it to your customer-facing interactions. Start internally so your people can learn how they work and you can slowly train them. So that's a very safe use case. And to Jordan's point, especially if you have customer information embedded into, let's say, your vector database, your RAG model, you can learn very quickly while you're on the phone. Hey, I'm talking to Ken Graziano. What does he like? Oh, he likes ZZ Top. Mention something about ZZ Top. And he smiles. You're like, oh, there we go. Now I've got a happy client, a happy prospect, a happy customer, whatever. The point is, use this stuff carefully first, and then incrementally you turn it to the outside world. Is that about right, Ken? 1 minute.
Yeah, yeah, no. Sunny Beatty, the CIO at Snowflake, mentioned in a talk a couple of months ago about wanting to build something like that internally for new employees at Snowflake that would be their personal assistant and help onboard them into the company, so that, you know, they would, when they join the company, they'd immediately have a resource that could answer all kinds of questions about life at Snowflake and their job, and help them out with that and get them more productive sooner. And that was, you know, his vision was to have that internal, right? We start with that internal, and you just imagine the external implications of that, of people asking about using the Snowflake product, you know, who to interact with the Snowflake, who could help me with this. And it's like, oh,
Right.
hey, sounds like maybe you need some help from our professional services team, right?
Mhm.
Here's a contact to reach out to. We have this solution architect who's done these type of things already, and the questions you're asking indicate you need some help with that. But it's going to
That's
start
right.
off internally with people who just need to learn their job.
That's fantastic stuff. Podcast bonus segment coming up next. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio with Jordan Morrow of AgileOne and Ken Graziano, apparently of ZZ Top. I think maybe he might be touring with them next year. We'll find out. He's a good rocker, so he knows. But I want to throw at each of you my big picture vision of, I think, where this stuff is going. I think it's going to be really, really exciting. And I interviewed Naveen Rao from Mosaic ML on this show like a week after he got the $1.4 billion transaction or whatever it was. We were joking it was the fastest $1 billion transaction ever. It was pretty impressive. Hats off to Ali Ghodsi for that one. But I'll tell you what I see happening here, guys, is that smart companies are going to build their own model. Well, they're going to take one of these models, large language models. And there's a lot of other AI too. We shouldn't forget about traditional AI, because all that stuff like regressive models and customer churn, that stuff is still here and it's still good. You don't always have to use a large language model, but it is a very, very useful, interesting space. But I think what's going to happen is very smart companies are going to take their model, and they're going to start curating it with their trusted information. And ideally, you're going to be pulling from your ERP, you're going to be pulling from your CRM tool, you're going to be pulling from Salesforce, you're going to pull from clickstream analysis, you might pull from HR, for example. You might even get a feed about what the public is saying about the company, capturing little bits and pieces of you referenced in the news. And then the senior executives, and then slowly the other executives too, are going to have this interaction where the LLM is going to be their user interface, and they're just going to sit there and ask questions about the business. What's going well today? How's this new product offering going? Which products are working best? And you're just going to sit there and ask it questions back and forth, and it's going to become like your ultimate co-pilot for your business. And it's going to be incredibly powerful. And then you're also going to start seeing these actions. Okay, send an email to my sales team and have them build a report for such and such, enter, and it's just going to go bang all that stuff out. So you're reducing friction from the mind to action of the company. That I think is the future. Jordan, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely, if not even more, right? I mean, it's to your point that at the executive level, I want that tool to just ask questions and ask and figure out and learn. And then to your point, take the actions. And then you go to the data teams themselves, and the data teams no longer have to do all this heavy lifting. Kent mentioned it about the 80% data scientists. Well, data scientists weren't supposed to be spending 80% of their time doing all that dirty work.
Right.
They're supposed to be doing data science. Well, the reality is now they should be able to, right? As the tools get better and everything like that, I want the data teams doing this predictive and really digging in to find the insights of why these things are occurring. On the non-data side, and by the way, non-data people make up 90 to 99% of a company. Turn it over to this side where a data or non-data professional knows how to interact with the tools better because we've put data literacy and AI literacy throughout the learning of the company so that these tools really are your co-pilot. They're your partner, they're your best friend, and you work together and these models are talking to each other. It's exciting, right? And there are worries. There's always going to be worries with tech and all that and where it goes. But I do think when we augment ourselves and accelerate ourselves appropriately, then there's power behind this. And that's what I hope companies, big and small, right? I don't want small and mid-sized companies missing out on the wave. And so when these companies invest, and to your point, don't build it yourself, get something off the shelf and then modify, right?
Right.
And that sort of thing. Empower yourselves. That's a word I think gets used way too much, but I think AI is here that it can truly empower people if done right.
That's right. And you know what? I would close on business literacy here. And Kent, I've always found that when people know more about what you're doing as part of the team, they understand that. Most people, I think, are empathetic. If you get right down to it, they know because they've been through, especially older people, we've been through a lot. So we know it takes time. Not everything is easy. Well, you can use these tools to learn about what the people in your company do. What does a data modeler do all day? How does data models affect performance? What Ask any question. And the more of your trusted corporate data that gets embedded into these systems, the better answers you're going to get, the more you can learn. So everyone can learn all the time. You can go into a meeting and while someone's talking, wait, what was that? And get a little answer. Oh, okay, he's talking about this other project. In other words, you can use these to facilitate your understanding of what you do, of your company, of what people on your team do, of what could be happening next. All these questions can be answered. And that is very powerful. That's going to improve business literacy, which is going to improve data literacy, which is going to improve the business. What do you think, Kent?
Yeah, it's a whole ecosystem, and it all has to work, together, right? It's a like the food chain, right? It's all interrelated. If you take a particular species out, well, the whole food chain can collapse,
Wow.
right? So not having access to the information can cause a process to collapse in an
Right.
organization,
Wow.
and we ought to be able to figure that out. Using these LLMs, it's like, well, why did our delivery miss yesterday? Why were we 100% short on what we were supposed to deliver? Okay, well, let's figure out where the process broke and be able to ask those kind of questions. But that does
That's
mean that
great.
these um, AIs, they've got to be built on internal data, right?
Right.
That's where we have to start. And I think to your point, the companies that are going to really be successful are going to be the ones who start off really looking internally first, right?
Mm,
They've got to understand their own business and the way their business is actually working, as opposed to the way the CEO is being told it works.
Right.
He needs to be able to ask those questions, like you were saying, Jordan. He can go, the CEO can ask a question and get answers and dig deeper and deeper and deeper and maybe identify, oh wow, we've got a process problem. I thought we did X, Y, and Z. We're actually going from A to Z and skipping everything in between. You know, whose department's responsible for this? Okay, fire off an email to them, say, and schedule a meeting. Find a place in our calendar in the next 2 weeks for me and the department head to get
That's
together and
great.
talk about this problem. Write the email telling him what problem we want to talk about and tell him it's an urgent meeting. And boom, it's off and running. And then he can go off. The CEO can go off and manage a different problem, find a different problem, or interact with their investors, whatever it is they need to do, but be much more efficient at their job rather than having to necessarily dictate a memo to somebody
Right.
and tell the assistant, hey, go scour the Google Calendar here and see when do the two of us actually have time free that we
Right.
could actually meet
I
or
mean,
move things around.
that's such a good point. That's such a simple thing. There are so many of these simple, tedious tasks in business that take up a lot of time, are a real pain in the rear to do, and all that stuff can go out the window with these models. And I do want to thank our studio audience here. We had a few folks show up at our interesting time here, but though someone commented about lack of dates and lack of citations and articles. Absolutely, that is a problem. We're going to see that baked into these large language models more and more, I guarantee. Things like blockchain can come in very handy because it's immutable and you can find out when it happened, where it happened, knowing where, what, why, when, who, how, all that stuff is very important for business. And that's why it's going to get baked into these models. Folks, look these gentlemen up online, Jordan Morrow of AgileOne and Ken Graziano. We'll see you in New York City. Send me an email. I might be able to get you a pass. Info@dmradio.biz. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to DM Radio.